Many Europeans no longer believe that they can meaningfully change the direction of their countries.
But I do understand that voters are frustrated, they're impatient for change.
They vote, governments collapse, opposition parties replace them, protest movements explode across Europe. And yet on the biggest issues, mass immigration, European integration, censorship, and war, the same broad policies continue almost everywhere. Now that growing sense of political paralysis, that sense of impotence, that fear that reform might be impossible, this may be one of the most important developments now unfolding in the Western world. Hello, I'm Michael. This is Southern Realism, a channel about power, geopolitics, and decline. The latest example of this comes from the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is deeply unpopular. Reviled would not be an overstatement. Labour was soundly rejected in the recent local elections.
It's a very disappointing result.
While Nigel Farage's Reform Party was the clear winner.
Truly historic shift in British politics.
Gaining support from voters unhappy about immigration, economic decline, and the direction of their country as a whole. Many voters expected this massive backlash to force a major political shift.
Labour has suffered huge losses after millions of people went to the polls in England, Wales and Scotland.
Instead, Starmer's very first response was to say that he was pushing Britain even closer to the European Union.
This Labour government will be defined by rebuilding our relationship with Europe by putting Britain at the heart of Europe.
And now one of the leading Labour figures hoping to replace him, Wes Streeting, is openly calling Brexit a catastrophic mistake and arguing that Britain should rejoin the European Union.
Britain's future lies with Europe and one day, back in the European Union. Leaving the European Union was a catastrophic mistake.
Now think about what this means. Millions of British voters supported Brexit because they wanted sovereignty, border control, and independence from Brussels. Brexit became one of the largest democratic movements in modern European history.
I'm hoping this begins the end of this project. It's a bad project. It isn't just undemocratic, it's anti-democratic.
And yet years later, major parts of the British establishment are doing everything they possibly can to bring back the exact system that voters rejected. And Britain is not alone in this. Anytime something outside of the establishment consensus emerges, immense institutional pressure pushes politics back towards continuity. The faces may change, the slogans may change, but the deeper direction remains remarkably similar. This is why frustration across Europe keeps intensifying. Large portions of the population increasingly feel that they are voting for change while receiving only slightly modified versions of the very same policies. And when voters reject the preferred direction of the European elites, they are often accused of threatening democracy itself. This is a very real paradox emerging in Europe. Democracy by definition is the rule of the people, but many elites seem to believe that democracy actually means protecting institutional direction, regardless of what the voters want.
We'll see. If things go in a difficult direction, I've spoken about Hungary and Poland, we have tools.
If voters support greater EU integration, deeper military commitments, or continued mass migration, the result is celebrated as democratic and wonderful. But if voters demand less migration, less EU authority, or a different foreign policy direction, they are frequently portrayed as dangerous, extremist, or even anti-democratic.
The AfD is to be classified as a confirmed right-wing extremist party because the AfD demonstrably pursues efforts against the free democratic basic order.
In other words, voting against the institutional consensus increasingly becomes a threat. And this helps explain why dissatisfaction remains so high despite constant elections. The institutions themselves, the European Commission, the bureaucracies, the courts, the media systems, financial institutions, and transnational networks possess enormous inertia. They shape long-term policy direction regardless of which party temporarily wins office. Now, this suggests the range of acceptable outcomes may be much narrower than many voters believe. And this is becoming especially visible on questions of war and foreign policy. Even after years of economic decline, energy shortages, and public exhaustion from the seemingly endless Ukraine war, most major European political figures continue supporting the same broad trajectory: deeper NATO integration, rising military spending, continued confrontation with Russia, and greater centralization at the European level. So Europeans increasingly find themselves inside political systems where trust declines, anger grows, and elections continue, but the overall direction changes very little. And that may be why so many people across Europe now feel politically homeless inside systems that still call themselves democratic, but are incapable of meaningful change.